This happened to me about a month ago, but it still boggles me. 2 points of background to make this story make sense. One, I live in Tokyo and commute via those famously crazy crowded trains daily. They exist on this kind of unspoken agreement that everyone works together to make this suck as little as possible. People for the most part hold their backpacks in front of them, men don't manspread, etc. But that's only when the trains are full. About 2 stops before mine, the train goes from sardine can to everyone on this train could lay on the seats and have room left over. So usually I can sit down at this point. 2, I'm not a Japanese woman. Very obviously so. Even when I'm in my white dress shirt and pencil skirt like all the other office drones, I'm often the only non-Japanese woman on my train in the morning. But despite my appearance, I'm fluent in Japanese. So one day I sit down when the train empties out, headphones in, mobile game going, ready to enjoy the 10 minutes of sitting I get on my hour commute. I'm sitting with my legs crossed, but there's maybe 10 people in the whole car, so I'm not in anyone's way. I'm tuned out when all of a sudden a hand reaches out and grabs my bare knee. I'm in a skirt, by the way. I of course jolt straight out of my skin, rip out my headphones, and look up at the hand's owner. It's some skinny old Japanese dude in his 60s. He points at my legs, then at other people on the train. In slightly broken English, he says, "You must not cross legs." I'm so bewildered by this, I start to tell him in Japanese, the train isn't crowded right now, I'm not in anyone's way. But he doesn't like this answer. He starts to reach for my legs again, presumably to uncross my legs himself. I, liking even less of this, sum up my loudest non-scream, "Don't touch me," and thankfully this is enough to get him to stop that, as another thing you don't do on trains here is make a fuss. Sadly though, yet another thing you don't do here is get involved. So despite a woman all but screaming "don't touch me," it's some foreign woman causing trouble. Best not to get involved, so no one comes over. So while I've made it clear that I will not stand for physical confrontation, this old dude still feels comfortable enough to stand directly in front of me, nearly knee to knee, looming over me while he repeats endlessly, "You must." He did this for at least 5 minutes. I didn't move, I didn't blink or break eye contact. I started plans B through P of how to get off this train at the next stop. Thankfully, he gave up before the next stop, shaking his head and calling me the B word in Japanese before wandering off. I still take the same train, but I haven't seen him since. About a year ago, I was walking to town from my house to do a little shopping. A guy stopped me. At first I thought he was just lost and needed directions, but he said, "I'm sorry about stopping you, I just thought you were so pretty. I have to give you my number." I thanked him awkwardly because it's not every day some stranger just comes up to you and says that, but told him I had a boyfriend and refused to take his number. He seemed to take it well, and I went on my way without seeing or hearing from him again that day. A couple of days later, I was heading to town again. There was the same guy, in almost the same spot. Again, he attempted to stop me and give me his number, but I had a dentist appointment that I was going to be late for if I had stopped. So he tried to walk next to me all the way to my dentist. I took a detour through a clothes shop with 2 exits and lost him in the racks of clothes. About a week or so later, I'm pushing my daughter in her buggy into town to meet my mother for lunch. The same guy is waiting for me again. I saw him, he saw me see him, and I turned and walked the way I had come. He started to follow me. I didn't head to my house because I didn't want him to know where I lived. I called my mother, told her I was going to be a little late because some creep was following me, and turned into a residential street. There was an older man, maybe in his 70s, out mowing his lawn. I had turned onto the street ahead of the creep and hurried over to this guy. I quickly explained that some strange man was following me and I didn't feel safe, particularly since I had my daughter with me. He let me into his house and we just stood behind the door, out of sight. The creepy guy went past, and once he was gone, the old guy let me know and I hurried off into town as quickly as I could. On my way home, my mom gave me a lift home in her car. We stopped by the old man's house and gave him some apple pie and flowers to say thank you for being so kind. I haven't seen that creep since. I had actually met this person on a dating site. However, as time went on, the relationship between us became strictly platonic. There were no red flags, my gut did not warn me, so I completely trusted this person. We met up in town behind a bus station on a grassy hill surrounded by trees and a tall wall. Our meeting was just to have a smoke, get a little high, and to have a small catch-up. The meeting was fine. I had actually started a few months before, so I was still relatively new to it. He had brought something new for me to try, purple haze. I wasn't all anxious about trying it, as I completely trusted this person and would never believe that he would lie to me. He had packed a full blunt for me, but I only managed to smoke a quarter of the blunt. We spoke during this time about work, our previous relationships, and random stuff. About half an hour later, I started to feel extremely lightheaded and anxious. I suddenly had this strange feeling where I did not feel comfortable at all, and I really wanted to go home. When I asked him if I could go home, he offered me to take me home, but I said, no, it's okay. He offered again, please let me take you home. You'll be safe with me. I wouldn't hurt you. Wow. I shook my head and said, no thank you, I can take myself home. When I started to walk away, I felt like I was walking on a cloud. My head became dizzy, and my eyesight was a little blurry. I had never felt this before, and in time I started to panic. When we made our way down the hill toward the bus station, I was relieved, as there were a lot of people around, so if anything happened, someone would step in. I became extremely terrified of him. I had this horrible feeling in my gut that told me to get away from him, and when I got to the bus station, I told him I would call my taxi here and go home. His tone was no longer nice, but very stern. I'm going to take you home now, and he began to pull at my jacket. I told him no, and that I was going to go home on my own. He pulled my jacket harder, and I fell against him. He pulled me into him and told me I didn't need to be scared of him. But I was so terrified. At this point, I started to feel very paranoid, and I couldn't see properly. I pushed him away from me and rubbed my eyes and called for a taxi. He tried to pull my phone from me and yelled at my face, "Do you ever listen? I'm taking you home." I noticed a few people had stopped and asked if I was okay. All I remember was that I wanted to go home. So a lady kindly called a taxi for me and waited with me, made sure I was okay, and helped me into the taxi. During the time when I waited for the taxi, he kept trying to get me to come to his car with him, but the lady that looked after me told him to go home and that she was going to take me home instead. So he left. When I got home, I gave the taxi driver money and told him to keep the change. I didn't want to wait around. I just wanted to get into my bed because at that time, it was the only place I would feel and be safe from harm. That evening, I laid in bed for 5 hours straight, staring at the ceiling. I don't remember if I thought about anything or if Mom came in at any time. I just remember lying in bed doing nothing until the paranoia and the sickly feeling began to wear off. I remember looking at my phone and seeing I had 32 missed calls from him, 10 voicemails left, and 50 plus messages. The messages were weird. He had sent around 20 messages just asking where I was, and in one of the voicemails, he had told me how he had this fantasy of taking me home while I was drugged up and tying me up. He wanted to blindfold me, and he wanted to submit myself to him. I freaked out and blocked him on all social media, Instagram, Snapchat, Discord, and I blocked his number. Before the blocking, I told him if he ever contacted me again, then I would call the police. I heard nothing from him for a month, until I received a text from an unknown number asking me how I was. I hadn't given my number to anyone, so I ignored it. I then received another message a few minutes later saying they missed me and they would see me soon. I asked who they were. No reply. Nothing. I've spoken to some friends with regards to my story, and all of them have explained that smoking weed would never make anyone feel this way, and a lot of them think I was given spice, not weed. Spice looks a lot like weed, but the effects are a lot stronger and more dangerous.